I say this a lot about Christianity, but we often want to add Christianity like it's something that we add to our lives, when Christianity is really an atomic bomb that once you bring it in, you set it off, and it destroys everything in your life and remakes something new. That's really what the Christian faith is supposed to be about. And if that's what the Christian faith is supposed to be about, that's prayer is the foundation that you rebuild that whole life on. Does that make sense? To me, this is such a sacred topic because prayer isn't something that we need to add to our faith. Without prayer, we don't have faith. Without prayer, we don't have Christianity. Without prayer, everything that we do is pointless. And so we're not talking about something that we're adding to the structure that we've built of our Christian faith. We're talking about the foundation that our Christian faith is built on. And if you don't have this foundation, then you don't have anything. And I think even using the parable that Jesus tells that this church is named after, it really is that sand, if you build your house on sand, is building your house without a prayer life. Because when the winds and the waves of this world come and beat on that house, it will fall. And I don't even think, honestly, you can engage this without prayer. Because if you don't have a prayer life, this is just stuff about God, but you don't actually know him. Does it make sense? Like in the same way that I can know stuff about you, and not know you at all. But I can know a lot of things about you. When we approach this is useless. This is just empty pages without prayer. And so the very foundation that we have to build everything on is prayer. I think the way that I say it is prayer is everything that we should do or be for a couple of reasons. One, you can't know yourself without prayer. You can't. You can't actually know who you are and what you were made to be without praying to God. God helps define you. Prayer reminds us of who we are and of whose we are. The second thing is you can't change yourself without prayer. Ultimately, we aren't what we think or believe. Ultimately, we are what we desire. And the focus of our desires, the way that we focus our desires, is through prayer. Christianity, we've made into morality in America, right? Like we've made it a moral set of laws. And if you do all of the moral set of laws, then you're a good Christian. You know, listen to Caleb, don't cuss too much, except for maybe on the freeway, right? No, I'm just kidding. Don't cuss too much. Listen to Christian music. Don't watch certain movies. Make sure you attend church regularly. Tithe, Don't watch pornography. Like, as long as you fulfill this list of things, hey, you're a good Christian. But Christianity was never a set of things to do. Does that make sense? Let me say it this way. My wife and I, we have a really great marriage. And there are things that I have to do in a marriage to have a good marriage, right? Like I need to take my wife out on dates. I need to talk to her. I need to have time where it's just the two of us. We have to communicate about things. I have to ask her for things. She has to ask me for things. But how many of you know that that's not the basis of our relationship, right? Think of it this way. If my time with my wife was just, okay, we're going to go out on a date every week. A lot of people would say, oh, that's a good marriage, healthy marriage. You go out on a date every week. And from this time to this time, we're going to chat. And it's just you and me, nobody else. For this hour, it's just us. But after that hour, it's me time. And I'm going to do whatever I want. And I'm going to do it live however I want. And I'm going to go talk to whoever I want. How many of you know suddenly all of a sudden this is an unhealthy marriage, right? Meaning prayer is something that we incorporate into the very breadth of everything that we do. It's not just something that we do once. It's not a box that we check off. We can't really know who we are or be transformed without it. The third thing is you can't know God without prayer. There is a difference between knowing things about God and knowing God. Prayer isn't a means to an end. Prayer is everything. Prayer is God's invitation to come as close to him as we can. When we make prayer about strategy, or when we make prayer about being a formula, how many of you know oftentimes we say things like, well, we need to pray so that this happens. We need to pray so that that happens. There is truth in that, But often we miss the beauty of what prayer is supposed to be because it's actually not about that, right? Like I need to go on a date with my wife so that way we have time together, but the date isn't the point of my marriage, right? Like prayer is not a formula, it's knowing him. It's coming as close to him as we possibly can. It's about this one fact that God is a person, he's not a thing. God is a person, he's not an institution. God is a person, he's not a religion. God is a person, and we were made for him. And when we connect to prayer in that way, prayer starts to become vibrant for us today. But the main point that I want to make today is this one point, is that prayer is not talking at God, prayer is talking with God. That sounds trite, it could sound trite, but it's actually pretty intense when you really think about how we pray. It's not talking at God. Prayer isn't saying things to him. Prayer is talking with him. It's having a relationship with him. And it's not taking time in the prayer room to sit here in silence isn't a meditative exercise. It's space to talk with God. Even just changing that one thing, doesn't that sound like that would change your prayer life in the prayer room a whole ton? Because oftentimes we show up to the prayer room, open up our Bible, we listen to the synth of the worship music that's happening, and we go, we got some vibey synths that go off in here, some pads, like there's some good synthesized pads that go off in here. But you could sit here and have a great atmosphere. You could have a live band and they're singing songs and they're worshiping. But if you're not treating that space as a conversation time with God, it's gonna feel like this struggle or this discipline. I used to have this youth pastor who always told us, he was a coach, he was like a jock. So like everything was, he talked to all of us teens like he was a coach all the time. So he's like, it's a discipline. You got to do it even when it's hard. You got to do it even when it sucks. You got to show up and you got to pray and you got to sit there and you got to gut it out. You got to do it over and over and over again. And it for the first part of my life, it trained me into, okay, well, I just got to do this because it's necessary. It's a discipline, and it is a discipline, but it's a discipline in the same way that going on a date and having conversations with my wife is a discipline. It's a discipline that we need to make sure we schedule it on a regular basis, but if it's just me getting through the date, how many of you know that that's not a really good date, right? Like when we sit down with God, it's the space that we're creating in our life to have a conversation where he can say things to us and we can say things to him and we can share our hearts. We can gaze and wonder at who he is. One of the reasons why we find prayer boring is because we're boring. We show up with our boring selves, with our boring vision, and we have no plan and we have no vision for prayer at all. We just think it's a discipline that we got to gut out, and so we never find any enjoyment in it. When prayer is actually an invitation to enjoy God.